Now let's explore the chemicals inventory. Now the chemical inventory allows you to keep track of your chemicals and to accurately account for their use. The pool techs out in the field will be using those chemicals during routine servicing of customers' pools, and the chemical inventory system will accurately bill customers for chemicals if you bill for chemicals, and it will accurately keep track of the chemicals that are actually used. But before we can use the chemical inventory system, there are three prerequisites that we have to turn our attention to. The first is we have to make sure that the financial system is actually on. So let's go to Preferences, Financial Settings, and the first field on the page says Turn Financial System. It should be set to On. If yours is set to Off, simply click the down arrow, select the word On, then scroll down to the bottom and click the Submit button. Ours is already on, so we'll just leave it that way. The second prerequisite is that you actually activate the chemical inventory. And to do that, you go to Advanced Chemical Settings under Preferences, and the very first field on the page says Advanced Chemical Tracking. That must be set to Yes. If yours is set to No, click the down arrow, select Yes, and you're going to set that option. But before you do, let's look at some of the other fields on this page. The next field over says each truck has own chems inventory. The system allows you to track the inventory on each truck separately, as opposed to the inventory that's in your stock room. So each truck can have its own inventory, and the system will keep it separate from the inventory that's in your stock room. So if you want to keep the inventory on the truck as a separate inventory, you select the down arrow, select Yes, and set it on. We recommend that you leave this option off, or No, select No for that option, until you're fairly familiar with the chemical inventory system. Once you're familiar with it, then you can come back in here at any time and change it to Yes. Below that, we have Track Chemicals Used. That is asking you if you want to keep track of the chemicals that are used in customers' pools, and that should be set to Yes. The default is Yes, and you should leave it Yes. The next option over asks Bill for chemicals used. These are chemicals that are used during routine servicing of a pool. These are not chemicals that would be, for example, included on a work order, because all items that are on a work order will be billed. So if you want to bill chemicals, your customers for chemicals that are used during routine pool servicing, you select Yes here. If you don't want to do that because your chemicals are included in your monthly service fee, for example, you select No. The rest of the information on the page describes chlorine tablets, skimmer sticks, and bromine tablets. These are accurate for 3-inch chlorine tablets, skimmer sticks, and 1-inch bromine tablets. If you use different size tablets, by all means, you can update these with the accurate weights, and the system will use those. Make sure that whatever you put in there is accurate, because the system is going to use these to make sure that customers are billed accurately for the amount of chemicals that they use. When you're done filling out the form, you click the Submit button, and the system will be updated. So let's go back to the menu. Now, the third prerequisite that you must attend to is vendors. You must add your vendors, and when we get in there, we'll see why. So if I had no vendors defined, the system would automatically put me into the add function, but because I already have some vendors listed, in order to go into the add, I have to click the add button. Now let's look at the screen. It's pretty straightforward. The first line asks me for the vendor's business name and their street address. The second line wants me to enter the city, state, and zip code for the vendor. But the third line wants me to enter the vendor's terms of payment. These are the terms that the vendor gives me for paying my invoice for the chemicals that I buy. For example, a vendor might say, I'll give you 10 net 30, which means I have 30 days total to pay the bill from the time I'm invoiced. If I pay the bill within the first 10 days, then I could get a discount. For example, I might get a 1% discount if I pay within 10 days, but I have 30 days in which to pay the bill. If I pay after 10 days, I don't get the discount, but I'm still not considered late. The system uses this information to inform you of the optimal time to pay your bill while getting the largest discount possible. Once you've finished adding the rest of this information, then you click the submit button and you've just added a vendor. So now that we've had our vendors added to the system, now it's time to add items into our chemical inventory. So click inventory, then we're going to scroll down to managed chemicals advanced or startup chemical inventory. Now both those options allow you to add chemicals to the system. However, if you have chemicals that you have already accounted for in some other systems such as QuickBooks, then you don't want the cost of those chemicals to be deducted from your accounts payable funds, so you would use the startup chemical inventory. If you buy new chemicals and you need to account for those chemicals, then you would use the managed chemicals option. So let's take a look at the managed chemical advanced option. They look and operate pretty similarly to the startup option, but the financial funds are actually deducted once you add chemicals. So let's go ahead and click our add button and take a look at the screen. The first field is the product ID. That's just the manufacturer's ID that uniquely defines that particular chemical. The next field is the product name, and second line, you associate the particular chemical with a test. You must associate with it a test so that when the pool tech is out in the field, he knows which chemical to select for which test that he does. So, for example, from my chemicals, I might say I select a shock and it's associated with my chlorine test. The next, I will put in the manufacturer and my vendor. This is where your vendor information comes in. Once you select the vendor list, you then get a list of all the vendors, and you just click on the particular vendor that you want, and it will put in the appropriate vendor ID and the vendor's name. Next, you will enter the quantity of units. Units here actually can be considered containers. So let's say, for example, I bought 3 containers, each containing 50 pounds of this particular shock. So I would put in quantity 3, the weight or volume would be 50, and the unit of measurement would be pounds. So I bought 3 containers, 50 pounds each. I put in my in-service date. I put in the date on which the chemicals would expire. In other words, they are no longer considered effective. Then I would put in a notified date. That's the date on which I want to be notified that the expiration date is approaching. Obviously, I want to use the chemicals that are expiring soon earlier. Then I put in the total cost. Note that the total cost means the cost of the entire purchase, not a per unit cost. So if I bought 3 containers, each containing 50 pounds of this chemical, and I paid $300, I would put in $300 here. Next, I'm going to specify how much I want to charge for those chemicals. So I have 2 ways to do that. The first way is to enter a percent markup. In other words, if I want to pay 12%, I want to charge, 12% markup on my chemicals, I would simply put 12 into that field. Now the system will calculate 12% in addition to the $300 to make the sale price. The other thing that I could do is I could actually enter the sale price myself by clicking the down arrow and selecting sale price. Now I could say, for example, I paid $300 for all 3 containers of that chemical, and I want to charge, let's say, $400. So I would put 400 in this field. So now I'm telling the system I paid $300 for those 3 containers, and I want to charge $400 for those 3 containers. Scroll down a bit, and the next thing I want to enter is my reorder level. My reorder level says once my number that I put up here, the quantity, reaches this number, then I want to be reminded to buy more. So I initially bought 3 containers of 50 pounds each. When I am down to 1 container of 50 pounds, remind me to buy more. How much more? I put the number here. So let's say I want to buy 3 more containers. So now this is saying when I reach 1 container of 50 pounds, remind me to order 3 more containers of 50 pounds. The next thing I tell it is where I keep these chemicals. So the first thing I select is either stock room or on truck. So I'm putting this in the stock room, so I'll leave it at that. I select the cabinet, and then I enter the shelf number and the bin number. Below that, I can add any details for this chemical. For example, I could put in how much of the chemical to use, how to use the chemical, and any special instructions I have for using that chemical. I would put it here. The next thing I want to do is to find the material safety data sheet, that's the MSDS. Find the web address. In other words, use my browser to find the material safety data sheet out on the internet. Copy that address and put it in this field. Then I click the submit button to add the chemical to my inventory. There's a list of the chemicals that have been added. Now my pool tech has access to that inventory that I've just added. So let's go back to the admin menu, and there are a couple more things I want to look at. The next option down after the first 2 that you use to add chemicals says transfer chemicals. The transfer chemicals option is used, for example, when I want to transfer chemicals from my stock room to a truck or vice versa. So you'll get a list of all the chemicals that are out there. I can select a particular chemical by simply clicking on it, and what the system is going to do is it's going to bring me up a menu with the particular information for that specific chemical. So for example, here We have the HDH shock, and it shows me the expiration date, the notified date, where it's located, and how much I have on hand. Down at the bottom, I get to specify what quantity I want to transfer. So let's say I want to transfer 1 and I want to transfer 30. Notice that it did not give me the unit of measurement, and that's because it automatically defaults to the unit of measurement that's out there in the database, which in this case is pounds. So I'm saying I want to transfer 1 container of 30 pounds of this chemical, and now I tell it where I want to put it on a truck. Notice the display changed, and then I simply select my truck number and I click my submit button, and it adds that amount of chemical and assigns it to the particular truck. And that's all there is to transferring chemicals from one location to another. Let's quickly go back to the admin menu and look at the final option, correct chemical count. Now sometimes when you take a physical inventory count, you will discover that the physical count doesn't match the count that you have in the system. In that case, you should come in here and use this option to correct the count. You simply select the chemical from the list, and it brings up the menu. Again, it gives you the information about the particular chemical and what you have on hand. Here I have quantity 1 container of 88 pounds. You simply put in the quantity and the correct volume or weight. So let's say, for example, I actually have 70 on hand. That's all there is. You click the submit button and it automatically updates the system with the correct quantity and weight. And with that, we've completed using the chemical inventory. Now this inventory is available for the pool techs out there to use either the chemicals that are on their truck or in inventory according to how you set it up.